Before David became the greatest king of Israel, he was simply a shepherd. While the world admired powerful warriors and mighty kings, God was preparing a young boy in the silent hills of Bethlehem. Every morning, David led his sheep across dry valleys and green pastures. The days were long, the nights were cold, and often there was no one to hear his voice except the wind. Yet David never felt alone. He believed that wherever he walked, God walked beside him. Many people saw David as the youngest son, too small to fight and too ordinary to be remembered. Even his own brothers overlooked him. But God saw something no one else could see. Every lonely night under the stars was shaping David into a man of courage. Every prayer strengthened his heart. Every song he played on his harp became an act of worship that reached heaven. Then came the day when danger appeared. A fierce lion rushed toward the flock, determined to steal one of the helpless sheep. Fear could have made David run, but faith made him stand. Holding only his shepherd's staff and trusting completely in God, David faced the wild beast. The battle was fierce, but the Lord gave him victory. Not long afterward, a powerful bear attacked, and once again David refused to abandon the sheep entrusted to him. These hidden victories became the foundation for the greater battles that lay ahead. Unknown to David, God was already writing a different future for him. While kings ruled from palaces, heaven had chosen a shepherd from the fields. One ordinary day, the prophet Samuel arrived in Bethlehem. Jesse proudly presented his strongest and oldest sons, believing one of them would surely be chosen. Yet God rejected every outward appearance. Finally, Samuel asked, "Is there another son?" David was called in from the fields, still carrying the scent of sheep and the dust of the wilderness. The moment Samuel saw him, the Lord said, "This is the one." Oil flowed over David's head, and from that day forward, the Spirit of the Lord rested upon him. David returned to the fields after the anointing. His life did not immediately change. He still cared for sheep, still slept beneath the stars, and still trusted God's timing. He understood that being chosen by God did not mean the journey would be easy. It meant every step had a purpose. One day, news spread across Israel about a giant warrior named Goliath. For 40 days he mocked the armies of Israel and challenged anyone to fight him. Experienced soldiers trembled in fear, but David remembered the lion, the bear, and every moment God had rescued him before. He knew that the same God who protected him in the wilderness would also stand with him on the battlefield. Carrying only a sling, 5 smooth stones, and unwavering faith, David walked toward the giant. Not because he believed in his own strength, but because he believed in the power of the living God. The valley of Elah had become a place of fear. Every sunrise brought the same challenge. The giant Goliath stepped forward, his voice echoing across the battlefield like thunder. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives lowered their heads in silence. No one dared answer his challenge. When David arrived with food for his brothers, he could not understand why the army of Israel stood frozen in fear. They saw a giant too powerful to defeat, but David saw a man who had forgotten the greatness of God. People laughed when the young shepherd volunteered to fight. King Saul looked at David and said, "You are only a boy." But David answered with quiet confidence, "The Lord who rescued me from the lion and the bear will rescue me from this giant." Saul offered David his royal armor, but it was too heavy. David removed every piece. He chose instead the simple tools he had trusted for years: a shepherd's staff, a sling, and 5 smooth stones from the nearby stream. His greatest weapon was not in his hands, but in his faith. As David walked toward Goliath, the giant burst into laughter. "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" he shouted. The Philistine warriors expected the battle to end in moments. But David did not slow down. He lifted his eyes toward heaven and declared, "You come against me with a sword and a spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." Silence covered the valley. David placed a single stone into his sling and began to spin it. Faster and faster it moved until, with one powerful release, the stone flew through the air. It struck Goliath directly on the forehead. The mighty warrior staggered backward. For one brief moment, the battlefield stood completely still. Then the giant crashed to the ground. The earth shook beneath him. The silence exploded into victory as the army of Israel realized that God had done what no human strength could accomplish. That day, David became a hero in the eyes of the nation. But in his own heart, he knew the victory did not belong to him. It belonged to God. As the celebrations echoed through Israel, David quietly looked toward the heavens with gratitude. He understood that this victory was not the end of his journey. It was only the beginning. Ahead of him were years of betrayal, wilderness, difficult choices, and lessons that would prepare him to become one of Israel's greatest kings. Yet through every season, one truth remained unchanged. The God who stood with the shepherd in the lonely fields would also stand with the king upon the throne.